So I have this side project I work on. It's a recipes tracking app, and I like to rebuild it whenever I want to learn some new technology. Well, Next.js just had a new release, has a lot of cool features, and I figured, why not just flip on the camera, try to rebuild my side project using Next, even though I've never built a Next app before, and see how it goes. So I say we do it. But first, I need coffee. Now I'm ready. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to build this from scratch. I'll speed it up when I'm just thinking and coding. And if I find something interesting related to the new release or anything I learn, I'm going to slow it down and cue you in. So let's get to it. Okay, cool. So this is the first new feature here, this error modal dialog. It looks really nice. And I was just moving this head tag from my index page to kind of my app wrapper here. And it's very clear it's not defined. So looks like we have an auto import. And boom, we're off to the races. And now it looks like Tailwind is set up. So if I say text XL, boom, we're going. So this is great. This has been really easy setup so far. So this is pretty cool. I just noticed this little indicator down here. And if you hover it, it says pre-rendered page. And if you click on it, it brings you over here and it says that this indicator means that the page qualifies for automatic static optimization, which means we're not using these two hooks from Next so that our server doesn't need to make any blocking data requests before our server is able to deliver our page to the user. So this is pretty interesting. I'm going to keep my eye on this because the way I'm going to do data fetching and mutation on this app is only on the client. So I'm going to try to make sure I don't use these hooks, and that means that I should see this little indicator on every one of my pages. Okay, so let me catch you up a bit. I've got data coming from my backend here, and overall it was really easy. I have an existing backend for this app. Like I said, this app already exists, and I use Hasura and a GraphQL endpoint, so you might have seen me over here just getting my query all set. And of course, this is like one of my favorite parts of GraphQL here. So actually, we want to sort this. These aren't sorted, so I'm just going to go ahead and order these by recipe name. So again, this is a recipes app, and I'll just be able to copy this right into my code, and that should take care of it. They should be alphabetically ordered now. And there we go. So this is my backend GraphQL. And for the front end, I'm just using SWR. Feels like a nice solution here to use with Next. It's from Zeit and Vercel rather. And this just gives me a little hook I can use inside of my React code, passing in this GraphQL query to my backend, and then I'm just rendering from it. So we're now fetching data on the client, but we can see we still have this pre-rendered page indicator. So all the data fetching is happening on the client, which means kind of the initial load here is going to be the shell, which is just going to have recipes and loading, and that's going to be deployed, to CDNs and everything like that. So we're still kind of staying within the recommended Next architecture here. I'm really loving these new divide utilities from Tailwind. You just throw them on the parent, and then you can control what happens in between all of these children. So I can just say divide y, 8 if I wanted a really thick border or a thinner border, and I can change the color here, but I kind of just use the default one and give it this kind of list treatment. So this is really cool. Another thing I started noticing is this indicator down here, which tells me the app is rebuilding. I think this is because I just changed the Tailwind config, and that's kind of like a global change, so it's redoing that, so it's taking a little bit longer. But it's just nice that this shows up right in my UI, even if I didn't have my terminal showing. I get to see this indicator right here. Okay, this is pretty cool, so I want to show this off. This is another new feature in Next 9.4, which is this absolute imports and aliases. So I just kind of refactored this aspect ratio component. This is something I use in a lot of my apps where, these pictures are all the same aspect ratio. I want them to be fixed, and then I want to use object cover here to just position the images. And so the kind of trick here, and if we check the definition out here, is to just have a relative wrapping, set the padding bottom to a certain ratio, and then use absolute on the child here. So now we kind of have this, and the image can just position and style itself however it wants to, but it knows it's going to fill in the aspect ratio provided by this parent component. So I extracted this first by just pulling it down right here, but then I wanted to try out this new feature. And of course, in an app this size, I wouldn't do this, but I just wanted to try it out. So I moved it up to component/UI. And this is usually kind of how I do it. I have like a UI directory in my components global directory here. And I start just by exporting a bunch of functions from this directory here. And, you know, the pain with this is normally if we use kind of a default import syntax, it would look something like aspect ratio from, and then I have to go up a level, and then I have to go into components and then UI, and that would kind of work, right? But this new feature lets us avoid that. And basically you create this JS config file, and then you can create these aliases. And now I've done this before in Webpack, so I can just use some absolute path at the top, but I stopped doing that when my projects got bigger because it would break auto import and VS Code's ability to like rename imports as you move files around. So I just kind of bit the bullet and went back to using relative imports everywhere since that was the most widely supported. But check this out. Once you configure this, let's say I'm using aspect ratio and I don't have it, I'm going to get an error down here. This is going to tell me aspect ratio is not defined. And right here, so check this out. If I bring up the auto import menu, we're going to see auto import from @UI, which is that alias I set up. So I'm going to click that, and now check that out. It all works. So that's really cool. Now, basically, as I add new, UI components, I can just keep throwing them in this index file, and every page and every component in my app can just import them just like this. So that's a new 9.4 feature I'm really excited about. Okay, I've been waiting to kind of run into this, and I think I just did, which is the new fast refresh integration with Next. So if we come over to the blog post, for the release, we're going to see that one of the big features here in 9.4 is fast refresh, which is a new hot reloading experience that gives you instantaneous feedback on edits made to your React components. It's now enabled by default. So it's actually like a more robust hot reloading, and I think I just ran into it for the first time. So I don't know if you could see because I'm going to be speeding this up, but I had basically, I'm building out this form. I brought in Formic just to catch you up. And Formic is usually what I use to handle form submissions in React here. So I grabbed a form component from Tailwind UI, and now I'm just wiring up the form to these initial values. And for ingredients and instructions here, I had actually kept, it was just a typo where instructions had an ID of ingredients. And so it wasn't wiring up with Formic correctly. And if you see here, when I log the values, when I click submit, right now I'm just logging them in the console, we don't have the instructions here. And so I went and saved this, I fixed the ID, and then once I edited this and I hit save, we got all the values. So that was a really cool experience because I didn't have to wait for the whole page to reload. I didn't lose any of the state in this UI right here. I was just able to do it like super fast, and it worked. And I think even if you make kind of an error, so if we were to just make like an error right here, we're going to see we have a syntax error. I'm going to fix it, and we're right back where we left off. So this is a really cool feature. I mean, especially now that I'm on the CRUD portion and I'm actually working with data and changing. I'm not just doing the design like I was back on the home page. This is a really exciting feature, I think, both on the React side and the Next integration side. I didn't have to set anything up. I didn't have to do anything. And the app is just as fast as ever as I'm building this thing. So I'm really stoked about this feature. All right, so I think I just got a really basic mutation working here, and I just want to try it out with you. I have my mutation GraphQL right here, and I'm using this GraphQL request library. And in the onSubmit of my Formic form, I'm just passing in the objects here as the variables. So this expects in kind of an array of new recipes to create. So I'm just doing one and then hitting that request endpoint. So let's make a new recipe. Let's get some chocolate chip cookies. I've been craving these lately. I made some of them a few weeks ago, and they were okay. You know, it's my first time kind of baking these from scratch, but I used too much flour. This is one thing I learned. You should never really measure flour by volume. You should just weigh it, because then you can't screw it up. So let's try to create this. I'm gonna come here and create chocolate chip cookies recipe. Let's go ahead and grab a nice image from this recipe. You know, these recipe sites are just absolutely insane, which is one of the reasons why I made this this app to begin with, so I could basically avoid them. So let's try to grab this image. That's good enough for me. Go ahead and copy these ingredients. And the instructions. And the recipe URL here. And with any luck, we should have had a network request go out. And if we come back here to the home page, Well, look at that. There's our chocolate chip cookies. Pretty cool. And it's neat that we're using SWR here, and this list just updated. I haven't really had to worry about keeping this list up to date or refetching once we create the thing. And that's part of what SWR does. When we come back to a page that uses this query, it basically might have showed us some stale data for a second, but then it revalidated and it picked up this new recipe here, chocolate chip cookies. So now this is saved to our backend. We can refresh the app completely and it'll still be there, and that's pretty neat. So we have a pretty simple app so far. I haven't built out the detailed pages of this yet, but I kind of want to deploy this and just see a little bit about the deploy process with now. And there's some other cool features, incremental static page generation from Next 9.4, but for us to get that, we would need to have some dynamic pages for each one of these recipes. But I just kind of want to see how the deploy process goes. And we have this little indicator here on this page and on this page, which are basically the two pages of this app so far. And so we should get static output for this app once we deploy it. So let me try to get this deployed up to now. All right, so hit a little snag there. I think Vercel here is saving me from myself, which is sometimes my worst enemy. I hadn't put in HTTPS as my API endpoints. I'm just kind of getting this demo going, and my backend isn't even secure right now. I'll have to secure it by the time I publish this video. But I had deployed it and it didn't load because the endpoint was HTTP. So all I had to do was change to HTTPS in my code here, and then my network request started working. But overall, I was very, very impressed with this deployment process. I don't know if you were watching, but you could just kind of see it. The first build took a minute. The second build took like 40 something seconds. It showed me the preview here, so I knew that the initial render was good and it was static and everything, and this whole dashboard was very responsive and updating and everything. So now I have this live link right here, and if I reload, it works. And if I just add a new test recipe, save that, let's see if that added it. Should be down here in test. There it is. So that's pretty cool. And then if we go ahead and check out the source here, we should see all recipes in our H1, and we do. So we're also seeing the loading screen somewhere here, right there. And so you can see, kind of this app shell model where the initial render of the page is going to just be static HTML and CSS. The React app is going to kick into gear, make the fetches, but that's all happening on the client. And so, when it comes to deployment, that's why it can be so fast and easy. This is great. And this should as well, if I start out on this /new page and we view the source here, we have our whole form here. It's all being generated at build time. And I didn't have to do anything to do this. I mean, this is pretty incredible, to be honest with you, because I'm using Formic, I'm using Tailwind, I'm using all of these things in my React app. I'm not thinking about this. I'm just writing React components, and I'm ending up with a server rendered page here that hydrates in the client and works exactly like I expect. So navigation is fast. I can tell it's cached once I use it, and I'm excited to make all these links work here and again, just feel how it works and experiment with some more of the other APIs for getting the static paths at build time and generating these, or generating them lazily using the new feature, the incremental rebuilds feature. So really impressed with Next so far. This is my first app that I built with it. But I don't see me not using this again for sure, especially for these kinds of side projects, because it's just nice to have a lot of these decisions made for me and the architecture kind of figured out. I used SWR, but I could have used anything for my data fetching and mutation. but it's kind of nice. It just works in the background. I just get to, copy my mutations and queries over from my Hasura backend, paste it right into my app, and I'm good to go. So hopefully you enjoyed that. I think I'm going to make one of these recipes and eat some lunch. So I'll see you in the next one.